Joyce. What's happening,
Peter
brother?
Forcelli.
What are you doing?
You know how it is.
I do.
All right, everybody, 7:05 p.m. on November 11th, 2025, the year of our Lord. Hey, everybody, welcome to the 10-4 Tavern. Pete, what's going on? How's the week going for you, brother?
It's been a blur, man. It's been a blur, but hey, today's an important day because it's Veterans Day, and I have the deepest respect for any human being that puts on a uniform to serve others. Of course, that means law enforcement, folks working in the United States as paramedics and firefighters. But, man, most importantly is the ones who protect our freedom, man, that allow for things like this to happen where people come and talk freely. That's our soldiers. So, man, God bless each and every one of them. And I pray for those we lost, but I also pray for the ones that are still around because, as you know, Tommy, our country, we don't always treat them right. We got a lot of homeless veterans. We got a lot of folks out there suffering. So it's an important day to pay respect to those people.
Yep. So I struggled this morning because, everyone puts up their posts on Veterans Day. And I was looking at all the posts and it said Happy Veterans Day. And I kind of dug into that a little bit. I'm like, all right, is happy the right word? And so what I came to was thank you, veterans. Like some of those veterans have been lost in Memorial Day for that and recognizing those that were lost. But all who have served in the military and the armed services, I wanted to make sure it was like, and it was really important. And I've talked to many of my friends, and including our own children. We'll get into that in a second. Thank you for my freedom. Because when you say thank you for your service, the way I look at it was like the way they say it to us for being cops and federal agents, right? It's like I would do it for free. I would have done that for free. I think the thing that I want to thank veterans for is my God-given rights that I was born with, that every human being should be born with, is born with, but in this country we protect it, and that they've protected those freedoms so that I can live free 100%. And say what I want to say and do what I want to do when I want to do with it. So that being said, I'm going to bring up a picture. So go ahead, Pete. The floor is yours for your kids.
Yeah, on the left is my daughter, Rihanna. She was a human intelligence collector in the Army. That's right after she graduated boot camp there. We were going to a funeral for a Coast Guard member who was killed in a motorcycle accident. She deployed to Iraq and Syria, came back with a bunch of medals, really impressed me. She's not somebody I ever thought would go into the military. She was kind of a nerd growing up, but she kicked ass, man, and did really amazing things. And I heard this at a wedding when other people she was deployed with were telling me things because she doesn't talk about her service because of the nature of the work that she did. And then my son was in the Coast Guard in Montauk, for those listeners in New York, for a while, and then in Savannah. And it's funny because he always used to feel bad like that he didn't serve the same level as my daughter because she deployed to a war zone and he was out there doing shipboardings of high-risk vehicles out in the ocean. And I was telling him, man, I don't know if I'd rather be shot at or brave the sea every day, boarding a ship at night, climbing a ladder, a rope ladder up the side of some tanker. So yeah, they both served. I'm proud of them both. And I know your boy served as well. So let's hear the stories.
Yeah, so Tommy on the left and Danny on the right. They're both 35 Foxtrot Intel officers as well. After graduating boot camp, they both went to Fort Huachuca, different times. Tommy's 5 years ahead of Danny in life, and then I think he was 3 or 4 years ahead of him in his career. Tommy then has always served in the reserves, and he was deployed in Kuwait, Syria, and Iraq a couple of years ago. Did a great job. He was part of a team that did extractions for any unrest in the Mideast. If they needed to extract Americans out of the Middle East, that was his team to do that. And the team that he trained up and that replaced him when he left his deployment was the ones who had to do the October 7th Israeli extractions.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So he missed that, thank God. But, everything worked out okay. We got, as many of the Americans we could out as we could, but none of our service members were lost. But that was his assignment while he was deployed. And then Danny served in only a Joyce could be activated into the army and then serve in Hawaii, and then be locked down by COVID. Only a Joyce, because you like the Joyces don't have, if they don't have bad luck, they have no luck at all, right? So my son gets deployed to, again, assigned to Hawaii, Schofield Barracks, and then can't see the island because he's on lockdown. And the kid had COVID 5 times while he was there because they just kept giving it to each other.
Yeah.
The first time he came home, right? The first time he came home, we call him up and say he's driving down from New York to come visit us in Virginia for the first time we've seen him in a couple of years. And we say, listen, we got COVID. And he says, I don't care. I'm still coming. I've already had it 5 times, so I don't care. So just so everyone knows,
Yeah. Well, looking at these pictures, brother, the one thing, I mean, there are kids, but in reality, they're kids, right? So when you hear people talking about, oh, these kids today all suck, you need to pause for a second and remember that we still have legions of kids that raise their hand and go into the service and do the best thing that they can for this country, and that's defending our freedoms. So, we should always paint with broad brushes. I know sometimes I have a tendency of doing it. I think, humans do in general. But yeah, there's still a lot of kids out there doing what our kids did, and thank God for them. It's the future of our country, man.
And don't let anyone tell you being patriotic is a bad thing, because that's what they'll try to tell you. Yeah. That's what they'll try to tell you. These kids love their country. We love our country. Faults and all, it's still the best country in the world. It's the best human experiment in the world that you've ever seen. And things are going to be brighter. Patrick Bet David, things are going to be brighter. Lou Hayes, good evening. We're going to see Lou Hayes, so a good friend of our LinkedIn family. So anyway, so Pete, before we got a great guest tonight. We got retired Chief of Detectives Gene Roy of the Chicago Police Department. He's going to come on and we'll talk a little bit about ICE in Chicago and Illinois in a minute. But before we do that, I know you are very, very attached to the government shutdown. So what are your thoughts? What's going on and the recent activity in the last 2 days? What's happening?
Well, it's disgusting. Look, these people, their job is to get together, right? Put their differences aside and fix the problems in our country. And they don't. What many of them do is they put party first, right? So that's bad enough, right? But when you look at the fact that you have federal agents out there that are not getting paid. You have members of the military not getting paid. You have air traffic controllers not getting paid. That's complete and utter bullshit that these people couldn't get back together and reopen the government sooner. My argument would be, all right, so because you weren't doing your job, does that mean we don't have to pay taxes? Do we get a refund for those 40 days that they were closed? It's time for us to stop electing idiots and to elect people that are willing to put the country first and stop putting party differences aside. And look, there are things that need to get fixed. That includes healthcare. That includes our immigration system. Or, when you look at all the things they're arguing over, let's bring up immigration, right? The immigration laws that are on the books now have been around for decades, from long before there was a Department of Homeland Security, which, as you know, came about because of 9/11, right? Remember, the Immigration and Naturalization Service enforced those laws back in the day, and they enforced those laws. So why all of a sudden now is it no longer acceptable to arrest people who are in this country illegally? And I get it, man. Some of them come here for a better life. My grandfather, for example, he came here. I thought he was always a very quiet man. What happened was he came here and he didn't speak English, right? So he didn't speak much in the house because now that he was living in the United States, we were Americans, right? I remember the only indication that we had Italian, stuff in the house was downstairs in the basement. We had a bar, and on the far left corner there were 2 little crossed flags that sat on this little thing. It was an Italian flag and an American flag. When his friends were around from Italy, he was very verbose, very talkative guy. But in the house, he didn't speak much because you didn't speak Italian in the house because we're Americans now. What bothers me is you have people coming to the country now that they want to bring their culture with them. And I respect the cultures and all that, but don't try to force your cultures on others. Come in and assimilate and be proud of where you come from. But don't try to change this country. To me, that's just offensive. But anyway, that's enough about my rant. But I'm really upset that it took 40 days for this country to reopen, all because we have politicians that decide that their party is much more important than this country and the people that vote for them. And it's just obscene.
So let me ask you a question. Do you think the fact that the elections from last week have been decided, and then the 8 Democrats came over, broke ranks, and now we're going into a resolution. Is that a coincidence?
I don't know. And look, the cities that they won and the states they won were pretty blue anyway. And I know they thought Chiarelli might win New Jersey, whatever. But I mean, these are. It's not like that they swung as a swing state, So I don't know about that, but who knows? But the problem is, look, hey, let's talk about for 1 second John Fetterman. I remember when he got elected, I was thinking, what the hell was Pennsylvania thinking? Because if you remember, it was after a stroke. He was mentally diminished a bit. But right now, he's one of the people that actually makes the most sense on Capitol Hill. Yeah. And to his credit, what he said is he will never shut down the government because he puts country before party. So here's a guy who I hate to admit, I kind of made fun of back in the day, who actually I've grown to respect, because any politician that's willing to say and adhere to that, putting country before party, has my respect.
Yeah. So if I'm hearing you correctly, Pete, you're critically thinking that you can actually change your mind and flip on somebody, and you can actually flip for them or against them based on certain behaviors. I think that's pretty cool, instead of just following in line with what you're told to do. Sounds pretty good to me.
It's as cops, Tommy. We respected cops that did their job. We also knew there were people who showed up, put on a uniform, and did nothing. Did we respect them? We might have liked them, maybe had a beer with them. We didn't respect them. We respected the guys that were grinding it out. Same thing in politics, man. I don't have to agree with your politics, but if you're doing your job and you're putting country first and you're passing laws, hey, man, I'll have a beer with you. I'll raise a drink with you any day of the week. I don't have to agree with your politics, but do your damn job.
Yep. We all want the same thing. We may think the path there is different. So as long as we can agree where we want to end up, I think we can make some progress on that for sure. Yeah. So, all right. So the government shut down. And the reason why I asked about after the election was like, yeah, they were mostly blue states. And like with Virginia, I liked Sears a lot. I was disappointed in Spangenberg. We talked about that on the last podcast. She kind of flip-flopped on the defund the police. I can't see boys in girls' sports at all. I don't care what you say on that. However, I think what I was asking was, do you think they held on till after the election just to make sure there was no hiccups, and that even though they should and they were leading in the polls, that they got the elections they wanted, including New York City, which is fascinating because there's a lot going on in the New York City stuff.
Fascinating is an interesting word. I call it more like terrifying what's happening in New York City. I don't know, to be honest with you, what they were thinking, Tommy. That could be the case. It's certainly an interesting dynamic, but I pray it never happens again. This shouldn't even be on the table to close down the government. It shouldn't even be allowed. I mean, it endangers people. It's stupid. They need to get their acts together, but
no, they do. And so
Schumer, dude, Schumer's done. He's done. I remember when I was a cop, you'd see him walking around with makeup on just in case a camera showed up somewhere. Here's a dude whose whole life is about politics, and he just filleted himself. And I think that's kind of funny, actually.
Well, I'll tell you 2 funny stories about Schumer real quick, and then we're going to get Chief Roy on. One is both of my sons graduated from MacArthur High School in Levittown, New York, and 5 years apart, Schumer spoke at both graduation ceremonies, and he said the same exact speech 5 years apart. That just tells you what a carbon cutout phony he is. He talked about the same tax plans, the same exact speech. And my wife and I, we looked at each other and laughed, and we're like, is this on instant replay? Like, is this replay over here? Like, he should have just sent a video. He shouldn't even have showed up. And then I used to take the Delta shuttle from DC to New York and back and forth when I was working at post-retirement. And I used to see him on the Delta shuttle all the time. And he's such a goofball. Like, I'm sorry, 50 years in politics, buddy. 50 years. He's the reason why I want term limits more than anything else. Term limits, and I will say I've become a cynic. I am done with all of them, Republicans and Democrats. They all hate us. They all don't care about anybody but themselves. There are a few. I'm not going to blanket statement, just like we don't like cops being blanketed statement about, oh, every cop is corrupt. I'm just done. I'm just done with them. I'm just done. I'm cynical. And I'm afraid the country's getting cynical. Nobody's going to jail. Nobody's being held accountable. No transparency. We're done. So anyway.
On that note, let's bring in
On that note, let's bring up Chief Gene Roy from the Chicago Police Department.
Good afternoon or good evening, gentlemen. Pleasure to be here.
Yes, good seeing you, Chief. Welcome.
Nice to finally meet you, Pete.
Yes, same.
You too, Tom.
Well, Chief, it's a pleasure, and we have a lot of Chicago stories to talk about tonight, so we're going to get into it. But before we do, because it is the tavern, welcome to the 10-4 Tavern, Chief Roy. Pete, what are you drinking tonight, buddy? I
am having some 1800 tequila, reposado. Great.
So tell everyone why you're the big tequila guy. I keep telling you this every week after week. Tequila, mezcal, tequila, mezcal. What's going on with that?
Well, I talked to some doctors who told me that of all the hard liquors, tequila is actually the easiest on your glycemic index. And I used to like bourbon, but because I am trying to get myself back in shape and no longer be a fat guy, and I want to be healthy as you can while still drinking hard liquor, I decided to pivot to tequila. So I don't drink Cuervo. That's not real tequila. That's crap. But I'll drink a nice sipping tequila to try to keep my my organs and everything functioning as good as they can while enjoying a cocktail. That makes sense.
Yep, it does. It does. And we had a mezcal tequila tasting. I did that for the kids for Christmas last year. My older kids, not my 12-year-old, of course. Although he did eat a dried out scorpion because we did a whole Mexican tasting, and the 12-year-old did eat a dried out scorpion. So I got to give him props for that. He was 11 at the time. So, and the same thing, he said the really pure mezcal and tequilas consumed in moderation is very good for you, very good for the sugars, very good for your digestive system. The tequila of 20 years ago and the bad hangovers and the bad is all the fillers. It's not pure tequila. So that being said, Chief, Jameson Irish whiskey tonight?
Jameson's Irish, 18.
Very good.
Catholic drink.
Very good. So I am drinking King Family Vineyards, again, local vineyard in here in Virginia, the wine country in Central Virginia, the Monticello AVA, for any of those really true wine drinkers. It is a King Family Vineyards, if you can see that, a 2023 Cabernet Franc, a great grape in Central Virginia here, Viognier on the white side, Cabernet on the red side. And the reason why I'm drinking this tonight is because right before dinner, Susan and I, we seared up a filet mignon. We seared off a filet mignon, and then we split that a 10-ounce filet mignon, and then I had the Cabernet Franc, so it carries over from dinner to the podcast tonight. So that's that. So, Chief, before we get into your stellar career, my understanding is that there is a lot of federal enforcement in Chicago and Illinois. What is going on in Chicago and Illinois?
What we see going on in mainly in the Chicago area is a lot of ICE activity directed primarily against the Hispanic community or in the Hispanic community here in Chicago. They're going out, making their presence known. Their combination of knocking on doors, doing street stops, doing a vehicle, looking around in vehicles. And that's what's going on. Now, it looks like the activity is starting to taper off. The chief of the Border Patrol has been spending more time in federal court testifying on the various anti-government lawsuits recently. And it appears that he's sort of tapering off his activities on the street. He's spending more time in court. There's rumors circulating that ICE may be tapering down or thinking about even moving out soon, but that's yet to be seen.
Okay. So I heard I think 2 days ago, I saw on the news 2 days ago, there were shots fired. Do we know what's going on with the shots? Like, has there been serious? I mean, that is one serious. Has there been multiple serious incidents? We're not even hearing about them, or is that an isolated incident?
No, if there's been shots fired, you're going to hear about that, because that's going to be widely reported with the news media. You know, the news media is listening to scanners, even though the radio systems here are encrypted. There's a delayed feedback. There's ways for them to get it. And also the people on the other side, the protesters, are blowing up social media and the regular news media when anything like that happens. So nothing's being done in a vacuum here. If there was a vacuum, it's like maybe it'll last for all of 2 minutes, and that's about it.
Yeah. All right. So, Pete, do you have any thoughts on the ICE enforcement up there? I mean, an update from the chief here. What's going on?
Well, no, I'll bet Paycheck, the chief, absolutely knows a lot more about what's happening in Chicago than I do. But one thing I do want to say, like, what bothers me about just how this thing is unfolding around the country, especially with these sanctuary cities. Like, as you know, Tommy, with trigger lock, when we had felons that were wanted, that got caught with firearms, and we were going to take them federally, we would go to Rikers Island, and they would turn them over to us, and we would drive them down to federal court. And that was a safe way to do a transfer. You know, you're picking them up, they're already in custody. You don't have to go out and knock on doors. I mean, there were some instances where they would get out on bail or something, but rarely was that the case. In a lot of these cities, they're refusing to turn them over. So now what's happening is, instead of being able to show up at the jail and take them into custody safely, and that safety also transcends over to the defendant too, you know, they're releasing them and making the ICE agents go out and find them. So what's happening is ICE agents are knocking on the door. Instead of just getting that one alien, they're finding 4 or 5 others in the house. Well, guess what? Everybody goes. Same thing, that they stop a car. They're looking for Pete Forcelli, who's in the country illegally, and they get Tommy Joyce, and they get, you know, a bunch of other people. Well, guess what? Everybody's going. So here in these cities where they think they're protecting the alien, they're hurting a lot of the aliens. But it does feed into the talking point, though, that they're not just arresting the worst of the worst, but that's a byproduct of the catch and release that's happening with aliens. So it's kind of like a no-win situation in some ways. And then you wonder, like, if you want to go one step further, I get it. Some people don't like our immigration laws. I'm not a huge fan of our tax laws. So do I get to obstruct IRS criminal investigators when they're out there locking people up? Or, you know, Gene might not, and I'm just, you know, saying this to say it, Gene. I don't mean, I'm saying that this is what you actually think. Gene doesn't like our nation's drug laws. So let's get in the way of DEA when they're out there enforcing the drug laws. I just think it's silly. Fix the laws. And again, this transcends back to what we talked about earlier. The politicians write the laws that these guys are tasked with enforcing. Those are the people who deserve to be protested and put under the gun to, hey, man, if you don't like our nation's laws, fix them. Don't go after the people that took an oath and are mandated by that oath to go out there and enforce the laws. You know? Anyway, again, I'm ranting.
Yeah, you can't have that. You know, there's a series of immigration laws here. And I'm going to put it this way. 3 out of my 4 grandparents are immigrants to the United States. You know, we were talking before the show started, you know, about our family histories. And, you know, I just found on ancestry.com the other day, found immigration paperwork for my grandfather, you know, Ellis Island, back in the early 1900s. You know, came across the Atlantic Ocean on a ship from Germany. He gets here, you know, he's got to go through, you have to be screened. Mm-hmm. You know, you go through the processing, you had the medical checks and all that. You had to have people who were verified that they're willing to take them in. It's kind of interesting, too. One of the reasons it took me a while to track down his paperwork, they spelled his name wrong 3 different ways, 3 different varieties, you know. So what are you going to do? But the point is, they came in, they did it the right way. They had sponsors. They cleared Ellis Island. It was down to the train station, and it was west to Cleveland, Detroit, Chicago, St. Louis, wherever. And there were communities here waiting for them that took them in. Mm-hmm. It's a totally different thing. You just can't have people, especially in this day and age, with the terror threats that we've seen and have suffered. You guys have all know how much that matters. You know, we can't have that. We just can't have people walking across the border. And they say they're good people, they're decent people, they're hardworking people. Okay, fine. Play it the way you're supposed to be played. Play by the rules. There's a story that's been making some notoriety in Chicago. A woman, ICE attempted to stop a car with a woman. She drove into the parking lot of a daycare where it turns out she works as a teacher or teacher's aide. She resists ICE. She runs from them, runs into the daycare center. They try and lock the doors, obstruct ICE. ICE gets in, and they grab her. And they grab her companion, too. All these stories are blowing up about, oh, this poor woman was dragged out of a daycare center in front of all terrified children. Oh, my God, the sky is falling.
Yeah.
There's no objective reporting. Objective reporting is a thing of the past.
Yeah.
The truth, once the truth came out, she came in, but they wouldn't let her kids in. She's here legally. She went and she worked with members of the cartel and paid them to smuggle her kids in. Now she's in violation. They've got it all documented. They had probable cause to arrest her. But that doesn't get out. The media is really, I'll fault two people. The media, they're anything but objective reporting, and you don't have to call out any particular station or broadcast network. They're all the same to a greater or lesser degree. But there's no objective reporting. And when the truth does come out, oh, that's yesterday's news. We don't want to know that.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yep. Well, I'm going to say that I stand really strongly on the position that the mainstream media, as we know it, the objective reporting that you're talking about, Chief, is the single biggest culprit in this tragedy that's been going on for the last 10 or 15 years. Because if they did their job, neither side could get out of their way and lose sensibility. They'd have to stay, but they're not being accountable. They're not being what happened to the pen is mightier than the sword, and we report the way we report, and it's what it is. And even the most left-leaning liberals of the 60s and 70s, my family, and I've said this over and over again, so anyone who wants to figure out who I am, I sit on an island, but my family were Kennedy Democrats. I was a Democrat Union guy. This is not about Democrat Republican to me. I'm right of Genghis Khan on crime because I saw what I saw. You know what I mean? I'm right of Genghis Khan. Like I will tear through Asia all the way to Europe and kill everybody who's victimizing and terrorizing and predatory people. So this is just crazy stuff. And if the mainstream media did their job, neither Democrats or Republicans would stray too far from really thinking. That's
Tommy. Let's look a little further. If you look at a lot of these talk show hosts now, a lot of these anchors, they're from politics. They don't graduate from journalism school anymore. A lot of them are lawyers, prosecutors, but a lot of them were former White House, spokespeople, or they were spokespersons for this committee or that committee. So it's almost like is a journalism degree even worth the paper it's put on anymore? I would lump that in with criminal justice degrees, But they've become the basically the mouthpieces of the respective parties, which is unfortunate because the truth is not coming out.
It's worse than that. Here in Chicago, there were two major print newspapers, the Chicago Sun-Times and the Chicago Tribune.
The
Sun-Times went bankrupt. They were bought up by a radio station, WBEZ, which was the Chicago Board of Education radio station, which also went bankrupt and is now a subsidiary of National Public Radio. What does that tell you? That's a Democratic Party, a hardcore, hard left Democratic operation, National Public Radio. There's no objective reporting coming out of there. Chicago Tribune went through all sorts of corporate takeovers. They ended up, they're nearly bankrupt. They had to sell their landmark building on Michigan Avenue just to survive. The good reporters are all gone. The ones that are there are the younger ones that have the tendency to lean to the left, and they're looking for gotcha stories. They're not looking for objective long-term reporting. It's sad because we need that. We need that guy who's going to say, hey, something's going on with the water department. How come these trucks are parked out here for 3 hours a day? We need that, but they're not. They all want to be focused on immigration. Immigration is the soup du jour, so to speak. Everybody wants it. You know, that's all the soup guy is selling. Immigration, you know. I didn't want to use the other term on the radio.
All right. Well, Chief, listen, we tapped into it. We're 30 minutes in. We did a little bit of government shutdown. We did a little bit of ICE in Chicago. So I hope for our listeners got a little taste of the current events and what's going on. But our platform here at the 10-4 Tavern is we like to bring on stellar law enforcement men and women who've done great careers and done great things and talk about the really good things that law enforcement does do, right? We have the finest Unfiltered team with Eric and John doing New York City politics and as kind of getting into more national politics sometimes as it's appropriate. Sal Greco's doing his thing. We got the executive perspective with Ron and Rob doing police work and from the police executives perspective. Mostly New York centric, but it does translate across the country. So if any of our listeners across the country can hear from police executives, again, a police executive like yourself in the Chicago Police Department, which I love Chicago. We'll get into this tonight. And I love the Chicago Police Department. I have a lot of great stories that we'll share tonight. But let's talk about you. Let's talk about your career. Let's bring you up. Where did you grow up? Where did you run around as a kid and go to school? And then how did you become a policeman?
All right. Like you, grew up in an area that was predominantly Kennedy Democrats. Okay. Chicago, when I grew up, was a Kennedy Democratic city. Grew up on the south side of Chicago, around an old police station. It was about 2 blocks away from where I lived. And every day when I walked to school, I walked past this police station. Now, on one side of the street, which is Cottage Grove Avenue, there was the police station. It was Area 2, the old Burnside station. The other side of the street was a family-owned restaurant, Iola's. And what do you have whenever you have a restaurant across the street from a police station? We all know who's in there all the time. Oh, and there was a firehouse too, but they end up cooking for themselves. So they really don't count. So, I saw that every day, twice a day, I was seeing cops. Now, where does the restaurant come into this? The restaurant comes in because on Friday night, if me, my sister, my brother were good, we had a good week at school, we got to go to Iola's for hot fudge sundaes. And of course, who do we see when we're in there? Sunday after Mass, pancakes at Iola's. Again, who's in there on Sunday morning? So I grew up, I'm like 7, 8 years old and I'm around cops and this is really great, and it was neighborhood. A lot of them lived in a neighborhood around there then and just had that affinity. And it just, you see things, you look back on your childhood and somebody made a positive impression on you. And you said, I want to be that guy. I want to be that girl. And that's what you end up doing. Later on, family moved out to a different part of the city. We moved out to the southwest side, not too far from Midway Airport, neighborhood called Archer Heights. Catholic school. Went to Catholic schools. A little bit of a rocky childhood. Your parents were divorced. There were some complications there. It wasn't an easy road, but my mother, God rest her soul, had some behavioral problems. It was a challenge. We were pretty much raised by my grandfather, French Canadian, very strongly religious guy, and my grandmother, also French Canadian. They met in Lewiston, Maine, and my grandfather immigrated from Lake Megantic, Quebec. That's where he was born, baptized. That's the city where the train got loose and the tank cars ran loose and torched the entire city, killed 50 people. And they always just talk about Canada. And I just loved that growing up. Went to a Catholic high school, St. Philip's, which is on the west side of Chicago after I graduated from 8th grade. And it was a good school. It's kind of funny. I met the guy who was later become my FTO, when I joined the Chicago Police Department, like 15 years later. But the King riots in the spring of 1968, and the neighborhood just turned bad. Two of my classmates lived in a suburb that was further out, about a 15-minute ride on the L elevated, and they got stabbed. They were just sliced. Nothing that serious, but still stabbed, during the course of armed robbery on the L. Their parents said, that's it. And that just sort of cast the death pall over the school. But it was really an educational experience the year I was there. And on the corner, the area was solidly African-American by that time. On the corner, right down the street from the school, was a funeral home. And they did cremations as well as traditional embalming. And sometimes you get off the bus to walk into school, and the air was a little thick. And, a little gritty ash in the air, And then it was funny. We sit in the classroom, and there's no air conditioning, the best of 1910 architecture in the high school, and there was basically 2 or 3 houses of ill fame across the street, and they knew that the high school boys, it was an all boys school, the high school boys were in there, and so some of the ladies were advertising, shall we say, and the priest would get frustrated. Don't look that way, don't listen. It was just crazy. But after my 2 friends got stabbed, my mother and grandfather said, that's it. We can't take that chance on you going down to school there anymore. So ended up going to a Chicago public high school, and graduated from there. I still had that interest in being the police, and I never lost that, even though we moved out of that neighborhood. Going on from there, I went to University of Illinois. Of course, I took criminal justice. And
is that in Champaign? In Champaign or
Chicago Circle? Oh, you can't call it Circle anymore.
Okay.
University of Illinois, Chicago. We called it Circle because it was the Circle campus. And of course, following a criminal justice major, and they had a project where they wanted you to. There was a local police station, the old 12th district, about 3 blocks down from the university. So you had to go there and sit in on court and write a term paper about what happened in court. Now, this is 1971, 1972. Criminal justice system was a little bit different back then. And just north of UIC and the station was what's called the Fulton Market area. With Fulton Market area is now high-priced, high-rent condos and restaurants. Back then, it was a meatpacking area. And there were a lot of, as we called them back in the day, hobos. And there was also a train yard back there. And a lot of heavy drinking going on down there. And basically what would happen is, in those days, the city still locked up people who were drunk on the street. Again, 1971, 1972. And what they would do is they would put them in a lockup in the 12th district. They were safe. They were warm. Gave them a bologna sandwich in the morning. They'd take them upstairs, and here's some judge. Dismissed, dismissed, dismissed. Have them walk out the door. Rinse, lather, repeat. Do the same thing tomorrow night. So I had to write a term paper about it. But, I met some cops up there, and I said, hey, what are you doing here? You don't fit in with this crowd, kid. Well, this is what I'm doing, blah, blah, blah. I met a couple people there, and it just again accelerated my interest in becoming the police. And I ended up working in that district about 30 years later.
So what year did you go into the police academy in Chicago? What year was that? When did you start?
I started in the Chicago Police Academy in 1986. But before that, I need to go back and jumped over a step here. When I went to college, I saw a poster. What's now the Illinois State Police was then the Illinois Department of Law Enforcement. And they had the Highway Patrol, which was the uniform Expressway and Roadway Patrol, and then they had what they called the Illinois Bureau of Investigation, which was, under the investigations, both undercover, narcotics, gambling. Gambling was still a major problem in Chicago at the time. I'm sure it was in New York too. And then they had narcotics. And I got hired, and I had a job. I was hired as a clerk. My duties as a clerk were I worked the afternoon shift, like from 3 to 11. After the office closed for the night, I locked the doors. Anybody wanted to come in, I had to let them into the building, check their ID and all. I'm a 20-year-old civilian with no weapon. So I had to check them in. No, they're not one of our guys. Don't let them in. I ended up answering the phones and also ended up running. I was like the radio dispatcher. Now it's an investigative unit. Wasn't a whole lot of in progress. There were no in progress calls or anything like that, but was still helping people that they're running registrations on cars while they're doing surveillances. The boss of the office then was a guy named Tom Drury. Tom Drury was a street-hardened, battle-hardened CPD sergeant, was on leave from the CPD, and he was in charge of the Chicago office. He had a great history with the Chicago Police Department. His father had been killed in the line of duty back in the 20s or 30s. And again, just the role model, just this is what I want to do. This is what I want to be. I want to be like him when I grow up. And I met some people. There were 2 Chicago policemen that were detailed there to work with the narcotics unit. And they took a liking to me. We clicked. And actually one of them one day, hey, what are you doing? Well, not doing anything. It's quiet night. Well, here, we're going to teach you how to type a search warrant. Okay. So here I am. I'm 21 years old. I'm typing search warrants. Okay. And I had a knack for it. And it's funny, these 2 guys who taught me that ended up becoming, they're obviously in their own way, they're trying to, hey, let's see what the kid is about. And I learned how to do search warrants. I'm 21 years old. I know how to do search warrants. And these guys were masters at it. The one guy, Wayne Weiberg, went on to become the commander of narcotics. So here I am writing search warrants, and it's just fascinating. Got to be up front on some major investigations. I also did a lot of filing and stuff like that. So, and then ultimately this was right around the time of the FALN growing up and becoming. Right. So the same riots that affected New York affected Chicago. And this is when law enforcement agencies, investigative agencies started doing proactive intelligence analysis. So my bosses offered me the job as an intelligence analyst. I'm 22 years old. I'm an intelligence analyst. What do you want me to write about? And back then there was no internet, no cell phones. Well, we see the FALN doing all this stuff in Chicago or doing all this stuff in New York. Write something. I got to go talk to the superintendent, Drury's boss, in a couple of days. Give us a list of who do you think? Read the papers. See who's been targeted in New York and draw up a list of similar buildings in Chicago. Okay. And a couple of them ended up getting bombed, So from there, I was getting, I just really wanted, I had the itch, really wanted to be the police. I took the police test in 1975, didn't make it. It was the city's first attempt at DEI and affirmative action. So I wasn't alone. So I was married at the time. My wife was from North Dakota or from South Dakota. There was a job open in North Dakota, of all places, for the Attorney General's office, special agent, drug enforcement. So I applied for the job, ended up getting it, and moved out to North Dakota with the wife and the 2 kids. And it turned out to be an unpleasant experience. It was really a culture shock for me. I'm a South Side Chicago Catholic. And Catholics were an endangered species in North Dakota at the time. If you weren't Lutheran, seriously, if you weren't Lutheran,
I get it.
you know, I thought it was kind of weird when people came up and we'd like to invite you to attend our church with us. Oh, okay. That's not the way we talk in Chicago, but okay. So what time is Mass? Mass? What's Mass? You know, Mass. That's what we go to church for. Mass, Sunday.
Yeah.
We have a service. It's a prayer service. Oh, so you're saying you're not Protestant? You're not Lutheran? Oh, no, Catholic. Isn't everybody Catholic? You know, I'm from Chicago. Everybody's Catholic. It's Kennedy Democrats.
Yeah.
It did some good cases. Again, my thing was I did some undercover stuff. I let my hair grow out, actually put curls in it. Had some good informants, did some cases. We also broke some ground there. We did some undercover work with major auto theft ring. People were stealing cars in Minneapolis and Chicago and driving them up and selling them to the farmers in North Dakota. And somebody crashed the car, and somehow the insurance company found out it was a salvage. It was a retag, and we did some work. Like, people didn't know what was going on, but I still miss Chicago. I always wanted to come back to Chicago. One of the reasons for going up to North Dakota was, we'll only be 150 miles away from the grandparents. They can see their grandkids all the time. We'll be down there 2-3 times a month. If we saw them 2 or 3 times in a year. If I wanted to take the kids to the zoo, I could drive 200 miles to Minneapolis or 250 miles to Winnipeg, Canada. And the winters were brutal up there. I mean, brutal. So took the test, moved back to Chicago, got hired, did well on the test, got hired, and the rest is history.
So that's really interesting because, like, you've got some law enforcement chops before you even become a Chicago copper. And just for our audience, which is heavily weighted in Northeast and New York City, coppers and dicks, my favorite. We'll get into that too, because we do not call them dicks in New York City. We don't call them coppers. But every time I've probably been to Chicago probably 50 times. So, and again, I'm going to name drop later, but coppers and dicks. And I have always enjoyed the conversation and the terminology. So 1986, you go into the academy. How long is the academy? And then where do you end up? What district?
The academy at that time was about 4 months long. I went to a district that's now closed, the 13th district, the Wood Street district. It was in the old Polish neighborhood.
They have Polish people in Chicago?
Oh, yeah.
There were back then, yeah. Matter of fact, my first night on the job, I'm with my FTO, and hey, the commander came up to roll call and said, "Which one of you guys got a recruit with you?" And my FTO, Bobby Gallegos, he's gone now, God rest his soul, says, "Hey, I'm with the guy here. We got an FTO. Okay, go over here and meet Channel 5. They were doing a story on Polish migration to Chicago. Now, this is January of 1987. So we go over there, and we're in this building, and it's an old building. It's got to be, turn of the century, 1900s. It's still got a dirt floor in the basement. It doesn't have a poured cement floor. It's got a dirt floor. And I'm talking to my FTO and saying, people live like this? They said, they come over from Poland for this? And the woman from the immigrant league said, "Oh, this is 10 times better than what they have in Warsaw." Whoa, okay. It was, and she wasn't kidding. I mean, she rebuked me politely, but she rebuked me. And, and it was a real eye opener. Yeah. So went from there and did some time. Stayed in 13. 13 was a nice district. Was kind of slow, and of course, being a young, aggressive cop, I wanted to go where the action is. And the action in Chicago at the time was the 11th district, commonly called Fillmore. And it was like the crime capital, the murder capital of the United States of America. And the way I got over there is The district commander was a young guy by the name of Chuck Ramsey. I'm sure you've heard his name.
We both know Chuck Ramsey very well. Yep.
And he's the district commander there. Now, back in those days, this was before the union had bidding for jobs, and the department could move cops around at their discretion. So Chuck Ramsey gets made the commander of the 11th district. His successor had a TAC team there, and he lost. There were 3 different TAC teams: day, night, and relief. Sergeant and 8 or 10. And one of the teams, lock, stock, and barrel, went with their old commander to his new district. So Chuck is scrambling, looking for people. He talks to a friend of mine. Hey, you know anybody? He says, I got just a guy for you. So I go over there and, make an appointment, go see him. And he wants to sit down, do the interview thing. And it was one of the most profound moments of my law enforcement career. We go through the generalities, the background, and we start talking about police stuff. And so Chuck asked me, he said, well, why do you want to be here? Why do you want to be on a tech team? What are you going to do on a tech team? And of course, the stock answer, I'm going to go out and I'm going to catch bad guys. I'm going to chase down dope dealers. I'm going to catch guys with guns, yada, yada, yada. He says, that's good, but you're missing the most important part of it, the most important half. Excuse me? He said, do you have any idea what I'm talking about? No, sir. I thought I covered it. He said, we're not here because of the dope dealers, the guys carrying guns, the stick-up guys and all that. We're here for the old ladies who can't go to the store without getting their purses snatched and them getting knocked down, having their legs or their arms broken. We're here for your grandma who wants to go out shopping. That's who we're here for. Never lose sight of that. If you always keep that in your mind, you'll do well.
Good advice.
I'm down on that. Good, Pete.
No, I mean that's great advice. Everybody thinks it's all about putting bad people in jail. That's what people think that people want to hear. But yeah, there's a lot more to it.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Chief. And Ramsey was right about that. Having worked in detective squads, Pete did his thing. He can share his stories. I mean, the hundreds and hundreds of homicides that I worked on, drug dealers killing drug dealers, corners being sprayed, the strays, and all of the innocent bystanders and the ones who were the innocent target victims of the carjacking or the robbery or the store owner, all of those. I mean, come on, of course that's what it is. And then I'm going to give you some latitude here. You're just a young guy looking to run and gun and have fun. And Ron Brooks, who's a future guest in about 2 or 3 weeks, told me police work is the most fun you can ever have with your clothes on. Yeah, but that's not the reason why you're doing it. It's so people can walk and live peaceably.
Yes.
That's why you're doing what you're doing. I was like, okay, no, I get it. And then young cops need that kind of leadership. So when you were saying, this is a really fascinating thing to me, Chief, because when you were saying you're in the restaurant looking at the cops and being the people you want to be, the cops you want to be, then now you become a cop. And we've had this conversation on multiple episodes of the 10-4 Tavern. Is like, oh, I was a young cop, a young detective, and looking at the leaders I wanted to become. So you were already looking at the people you wanted to emulate from civilian to becoming a cop. Now you're a cop and a detective wanting to become leadership in the police department. Those transitions never stop. And to this day, I'm 60 years old. There's still people I want to, learn from and do. I'm sure you guys feel the same way. But
well, that's what I took away from the chief's earlier statement about when he was working with those guys who helped them write search warrants and empowered him. That reminded me like when I started as a detective, man. I started with guys who were around in the Serpico days. And it was weird because at first I'm like, I have nothing in common with these guys. They're in their late 50s. I'm 20 at the time, like 26 years old. This is not going to be fun. And then you realize what a gift it was for those people to, first off, think enough of you to be willing to teach you, but then to learn from guys that had that sort of experience was something that I'm still to this day trying to pay back. So, I mean, and the fact that you actually enjoyed writing search warrants and probable cause statements and everything says a lot, man. Because a lot of people, that's the thing they try to avoid. But that's what makes a good cop, is being able to articulate things and put things in writing. So, I mean, you were given a gift earlier in your career. And the fact that you brought it up tells me that you felt exactly that way about it. Just great learning experience. So, I'm glad you mentioned that. It's important.
I've been gifted in so many ways I can't begin to outline it all. I've been extremely fortunate. There's an old saying in Chicago, I don't know if you've heard it in New York, and it goes along the lines of, never forget, we stand on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah.
For sure. So talk, how long before you became a supervisor?
Well, a little stop in the detect. I was on the tag team. We're still in patrol, wearing soft clothes, the blue jean tenny runner police, as the thugs would call us, the blue jean police. So, again, I was gifted by people who were role models, and, kid, running and gunning is fine, but 10 years, you want to be doing something important. You keep going at this rate, you're going to get hurt, you're going to get burnt out. Keep on moving up. And took the test for detective and got in the first class, and had a slight stopover, got sent to the south side, 51st and Wentworth Area 1, right? Later came back as a commander 30 years later, and the building was just the same. And did a stint on midnights. And my old TAC sergeant had gone there, and he was the administrative sergeant to the area commander. And the lieutenant there said, "Oh, you're a young guy. I want to put you on afternoons, and I need you to make arrests and do this, that, and the other thing." Hey, cool, boss. That's no problem. I did about a week or so of that, and it was like a 20-mile ride each way on the expressway, the Kennedy and the Dan Ryan. It was kind of tough getting the kids to and from school and all of that. So my former sergeant, he's the commander's right-hand guy. And he sees me one day and, "Hey, how you doing?" And blah, blah, blah. Well, okay, this traffic's a little whatever. Yeah, so what do you want to do? Well, I'd like to do something that's, I'm happy where I'm at. I don't want to keep burning favors here. And, wherever you want me, wherever you and the commander want me. He said, "Well, I'll tell you what, how about we put you on midnights? That way you don't have to worry about traffic either way." I yes, sir. Whatever the commander wants, I'm good. Thank you. And then my lieutenant really gets pissed off at me. "How dare you go to midnights? You're the only one that works on that watch on afternoons. What am I going to do for activity?" And I just, I'm sorry. I worked for the guy before. He wants me. What can I say, Lieutenant? I'm sorry. I had no idea. So I ended up working midnights. And the thing about midnights is there were like 3 of us every night that were property crimes, and there was a crew of maybe 6 violent crimes detectives. And then on midnights, the violent crimes guys just handled deaths, shootings where they're in grave condition, probably weren't going to survive, in very few in custodies in any high-profile cases. And then whenever they got short, if they ran into a problem, they would draw on the property crimes guys. Well, my partner in property crimes guy was a former homicide guy who came over because he needed a little slower pace. Got his law license. He was doing law cases during the day. So he wanted a slower pace. He didn't want to be tied up on the homicide. You could end up working 24 hours straight on. So we ended up getting tapped on jobs. And the sergeant, as it turns out, the homicide sergeant on midnights had been one of my evaluators on my detective test. He said, you're only going to be on property crimes for about a month or so until I get a chance to talk to the commander. I said, "Hey, do me a favor, slow your roll a little bit. The lieutenant nearly had a heart attack with me going from third watch to first watch. If you go in there and steal me to put me on your team, he's going to blow a gasket and it's going to come back on me. So just don't worry about it. I got it.
Yeah. Okay, so Chief, HFL. So Pete, I think this is a buddy of yours, Housing for Life. It's got to be one of your guys, and we've talked about. He's been a great supporter of the podcast for many, many, many weeks now. Detective tests for Chi-Town. So in New York City, Chief, you do a certain amount of time legislated by bills that were presented. It used to be 18 months, 24 months, 36 months, 54 months. They finally said, if you're in an investigative assignment for 18 months, you automatically become a detective. So you got to interview. So there's a lot of nepotism. There's a lot of choices. There's a lot of good workers that get the job. It's, it's kind of a catch as catch can. It's a hot mess, but no test. My son is a DC cop. He had to take a test for detective. What's the process in Chi-Town?
The process back then was to take a written test.
Okay.
And then there was an interview panel. So they still had room for, to adjust things. But it was legit. It was straight up, and it was a hard test.
And what's the current situation?
Current situation, it's a written test. It's a scenario test. One of my last things I did before I retired was oversee the development of the 2016-2017 detective exam. And there it was just everything had to be, it was a fair test. What would you do if you were in this situation? You walk in, you get this job, you show up on the scene. Question number one, what's the first thing you do out of the following four things? What's your second priority? Question number two. But was very interesting in the way that the test had to be developed. We had to send X number of people, detectives, down to the test developer's office every day. It had to be balanced by sex and race.
Yeah.
So, and, one day someone said, well, we're short one female white. Well, we don't have, the one who was supposed to be there has a subpoena for court. She had to go to court. Well, you got to get her out of court. Otherwise we got to cancel this whole day, and we got all these people and consultants are being paid. Don't worry, we'll take care of it. But it was that strict, And our guys came up with some real good scenarios. They were tough but fair, and it was a good test.
Yeah, good. So we got Ron Layson, retired New York City Police Department inspector, part of the executive perspective team. He wants to know, Chief, in Chicago, is it a civil service exam? Is detective a supervisory rank above police officer? Do you think this is the correct way, or should it be discretionary like New York, which they have zero supervisory? They control a crime scene. The highest, most seniority detective runs a crime scene, but other than that, they cannot tell sergeants what to do. What's going on in Chicago?
The same way in Chicago. What happens in Chicago, though, is my experience was that you'd show up on a crime scene, and the ranking officer there, the ranking patrol officer, well, who's the detectives that are handling this job? And okay, what do you want me to do, detective? Where do you want me to put my people? What do you need us to do? So they, you paid them the respect. You're the lieutenant. This is your district. We'd appreciate it if you'd have your guys do A, B, C, and D, and we'll take care of the rest. And you're going to be on the scene with us, Lou. We'll let you know if anything else comes up. Is it a civil service test? Yes, it is. It is a civil service test. And what was the third question again?
Just any supervisory other than the crime scene. I think you already answered it.
No.
Yeah. No. I know it's really, and we're going to get a chief of detectives that we're trying to schedule for a January or February from LA. LA is a whole nother story, and they do things really differently out there too. So it's really cool to have Bobby Boyce, now you, Chief, and then eventually the LA chief of detectives. If we
Sean Malinowski. Let me tell you a story about Sean Malinowski.
You gave us up, Chief. You tipped our hand, but that's okay. That's okay.
He's a Chicago graduate. He's another pride.
Yes, because he's back there now, right?
Yep. And as a matter of fact, met him. Interesting story. We had a project when I was a sergeant. He was on a leave over at the UIC working for a professor by the name of Dick Ward, Office of International Criminal Justice. That's when Eastern Europe had just got out from behind the red curtain, or the Iron Curtain, so to speak. And they were looking for help on how to set up civilian law enforcement agencies, because their law enforcement agencies, Hungary, Poland, and that, it was basically military police. The cops weren't walking around with sidearms. They were walking around with AK-47s. We developed a program working with them we sent high-ranking Chicago police officials over to Europe to consult with these governments on how to manage that transition from a military-style policing to a civilian-style American model policing. Great guy, Sean.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. So we'll get to that. Pete, go ahead. Were you going to say something?
No, that's pretty cool stuff, man. When you get to do those sort of consulting gigs and whatnot, kind of spread the knowledge of what we do here for policing in the United States abroad. Because, man, some parts of the world, and I would imagine back in those days, in those parts, they were perceived probably as almost like a secret police. It was a completely different way of policing in Eastern Europe back in the day of the Iron Curtain.
Yeah,
which is why
the guys with the fedoras and the trench coats, the other guys straight out of the Army. It was military style.
Yeah, which is why I want to go back to, as I get long in the tooth here and want to go back and travel around the world, the Eastern Bloc countries, because they're so much delayed from the Western style, Europe and Western culture. They still have some things going on in Prague and Budapest and Poland that still has some of the old country, and that's why if you're a traveler, get out there and get to the eastern side of Europe before it becomes westernized.
I speak down at the Department of Homeland Security's leadership.
Of course.
Down at Fletchy a couple times a year, usually 4 times. One time I went down there, and they bring in people from other countries. Like each time there's someone from Australia there, which is interesting. But they brought in the head of the corruption police from Albania. So he was one of the students in the class. Talking to that dude, man, I was like, holy shit. First of all, he looked like Dracula. He was scary to look at. But, man, there's the place where you would not want to be put in handcuffs and brought into a police station house for questioning. Interesting guy, man. Can you imagine the corruption that he sees in Albania? But, hardcore dude, man. Just scary, but it was.
Okay, so let's do a little check-in. We're a little over an hour. We're about an hour and 10 in. We have 365 live viewers, Chief. So thanks for that. You're a good draw. We'll probably get to the 400 mark, which is a really nice number for us on live. And then we'll get our replays on X and YouTube over the next week or so. So really appreciate that, everybody. Before we get into your next steps as an executive and commanding districts and stuff like that, let's do some Chicago name dropping. Pete, I know Pete knows some Chicago coppers, but I want to drop a couple of names. Mike Chasen.
Mike Chasen was my sergeant in Area 4 homicide.
Yeah. Yep.
Great guy.
Yep. And Tom Puffpath.
Tom Puffpath was a sergeant. Yep, he was one of our sergeants.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you a story, and I'm going to tell everyone in our audience, and this is for the NYPD people, so listen up, and listen up real good, because if you want to hear what kind of Chicago coppers, what kind of people they are, and if you want to hear the people of the great city of Chicago are, I'm going to tell you a story that is the one I'm taking to the grave, and I'm never going to forget, and it's probably one of my most appreciative stories I've ever experienced. I was the commanding officer of the 79th Detective Squad from 1999 to 2004. It's a 1.1 square mile area. It's our precincts are equivalent to your district's, Chief, but a lot smaller because we have 76 districts. What do you have, like 27?
We're down to 21.
All right, but you might have had like 25, 27 at one point, right? Does that sound right?
We're up to 24 plus the airport.
Yeah.
2 airports are separate units.
Yeah. Okay. So very violent area, but I loved it. And again, the good working people, the churchgoers, the people who are just hardworking, and how do you get the urban terrorists away from the people who are just trying to live peaceably? And that's the way that place was. So in 1999, I get there. Mike Harrington is the commanding officer, and he goes to the the FBI National Academy. And he comes back in 2000, early 2001, and he says, "Oh, I met these great guys in Chicago. There's 2 lieutenants from Chicago. They're great guys, blah, blah, blah." I was like, all right, whatever. I'm running cases here. I don't really care about your little boondoggle in the National Academy, right? So then 9/11 hits.
Yep.
And it's really, really bad, obviously, on our side. And then it turns out that there's a police chief in Spring Lake, New Jersey, who also went to the National Academy with these 2 Chicago cops, these 2 lieutenants, Tom Puffbath and Mike Chasen, and they also went with my boss, Mike Harrington. And it's December 2001, and they want to go to Ground Zero. So Mike Harrington and I get the chief from Spring Lake, New Jersey, Tom Puffpath and Mike Chasen, and Craig Biggio, the Major League Baseball player from the Houston Astros.
Okay.
Because he lives in Spring Lake, New Jersey, which is where Dawson lives, is the police chief in Spring Lake.
Mm-hmm.
We put hard hats on him. We take John Deere Gators into the pit, and we go into Ground Zero, protected, not in for anyone who's worried if we penetrated a crime scene. We observed the rules that were being guided by the FBI in case all these years later you're interested in what we might have done there. And we walked out of there, and obviously everyone was speechless, right? We were in the pit in Ground Zero. Fast forward to the spring of 2002, and Chicago coppers Mike Chasen and Tom Puffpath go, "Hey, get a bunch of your boys and girls, get on a plane. Let's do a Chicago Cubs game. Sorry, Chief, I know you're a White Sox guy, but we go to a Cubby game in June of 2002. And the night before we go, on a Friday night when we all land, we're going to go to the Cubs game on Saturday. We all go, 25 of us go to Gibson's. For anyone who's interested, the best foot post in the entire country is the Triangle on Rush.
Yep.
I don't care what you think about New York City's foot posts, because there are hundreds of them. The single best foot post to walk a beat anywhere in the country is Rush Triangle.
Yep.
And that being said, there's a sergeant by the name of Patty. I'm not going to say his last name. I don't know if you know Sergeant Patty. Begins with an M. Sergeant Patrick M. Anyway, he ran that post at that time. Anyway, the 25 of us sit in Gibson Steakhouse. There's an old waiter by the name of John, who's bald, that everybody knew, whoever went to Gibson's. And the next door, and the restaurant next door is Hugo's Frog Bar, for anyone who's interested. And it's the same kitchen, same steak, but about $25 difference, right? So John, the waiter, gets up on a chair, calls the entire restaurant, the premier steakhouse in Chicago, calls them to attention, and tells everyone in the restaurant that there are 25 New York City cops and firemen in the restaurant who are all first responders for 9/11. The restaurant gave us a standing ovation, and it was really humbling, and it was really, really beautiful. And then someone anonymously went over and picked up the tab, I think to the tune of about $4,000 or $5,000. anonymously, which is most
Yep.
important. And then he said, go back to, when you're finished dinner, go back to the front, up at the bar, and it's an open tab.
Wow.
And we continued going on. So that is Chicago cops, and that is Chicago people, the citizens of Chicago in a nutshell. Because every other time, and I told you I've been to Chicago 50 times, I would say that has always carried on. I've never met a person that I didn't like in Chicago, ever.
Those were the days.
So I just wanted to share that with our audience. I want to share that with you so you know that. Mike Chasen became the number 2 in the Detective Bureau. Tom Puffpath retired as a lieutenant. And here's a guy with 30 plus years still training the rookies, because he said to me, who else is going to teach them, Tommy? Who else is going to show these kids how to do it right? The people, the giants that you were talking about, and the shoulders that we've walked on their shoulders. Tom Puffpath said, I'm going to stay in the busiest districts and teach the rookie kids how to do the job.
Yep.
So that's one of my Chicago stories. I'm not going to hug up the podcast tonight, but I felt it was really important to share that with you, so you know that. And our
top-notch people. And if, God forbid, somebody in my family or one of your families was a victim of a crime, those are the guys you want on the case. Years, decades of experience.
That is the ultimate compliment, and we use that, and Pete and I have used that over and over again. That's how we talk about our folks the same way. Okay, so enough of me. Back to you, Chief. Your first big commander's job, like which district? What, like, when are you really starting to become an executive?
February 17th, 2005. I became the commander of the 9th District, which is about 4 blocks west of Sox Park. And the reason that is really a humongous step is it's in the old Bridgeport neighborhood. And the Bridgeport neighborhood was the home territory of the Daly family. You may have heard of them. Right across the street from the station and down about a half a block was where Richard J. Daley, the first Mayor Daley, lived, where his son, Richard M., who became mayor later on in the 80s, he lived there. And it was, and their brother, John, who was he's on the county board, and he represented that area for the Cook County Board. He lived down the street. This was still a Daley neighborhood. And it's old school. I don't know what would be the comparison to New York City, maybe Little Italy, not quite Little Italy because it's more Irish, more of a mix. It wasn't all Italian, a significant portion of Italians, but it was a mix. And it was old school vintage. It was people straight out of the 20s and 30s. And it was just that type of tight, cohesive neighborhood. The building, we had the most unusual building in the city. There were 2 separate buildings, one for the police station, and there was a firehouse that was right next door. It was just a single engine firehouse. And, the stonework out of the 20s, I think there were WPA buildings out of the 30s, stonework. As a matter of fact, the police station had been used in the shooting of an old Jimmy Stewart movie, North Side 777. And the desk, when I got there in 2005, looked the same as it did in the movie in 1947. It was just crazy. And it was a district full of characters. And, he had that strong political aspect to it because it was the homeland of the Dailies. As a matter of fact, a cute story is, everybody was used to calling the alderman. In Chicago, the alderman, especially back then, was like the mayor. There's like 50 wards in the city, so there's like 50 aldermen. So there's like 50 different mayors. So somebody was telling a story about they looked out the window one night, saw their garage was on fire. They pick up the phone and they call John Daley. He was the mayor's brother. The mayor had already moved out of the neighborhood, but his brother still lived there, and said, John, my house is on fire. And John said, "Don't you call the fire department?" "No, we're supposed to call the ward office first for anything that we need from the city." "No, pick up, hang up, call 911, have the fire department come out."
Yeah. That's funny. So you got the district. When do you go back to the detective bureau? Because I want to talk about the detective bureau. Pete and I, we lean into the investigative side of things. We're not patrol guys. How does that go back to you? How do you get into the bureau, the detective assignments, and then ultimately to the chief of detective? Because we are running late. We got about, it's 8:25, so we got about a half an hour or so. I mean, we've gone 2.5 hours, but we try to keep it at 2 hours. So,
yeah. One thing before we jump back into the detective division, remember there's a movie called The Year of My Life with I forget who the actor is. It's set in New York. The guy's a failing actor, and he's brought back to New York for one play. And there's some young kid that's assigned to be his shepherd, and keeps him gets him sobered up after he gets drunk in a tavern. And the name of the movie is the Year of My Life. Well, I get there in this district, and that's the year the White Sox go on a tear and they win the World Series. I'm a new district commander, and there's my schedule on one hand is, what are the Sox doing? Can they clinch tonight? And the other hand, what's going on with the rest of the district? How are the gangs acting, and so forth and so on? And I have to tip my hat to the cops. There's that one picture you have. We had a roll call with Jimmy Mullen, came out and talked to the cops. Yep. Those cops moved 2 million people in and out of Sox Park in the middle of a densely congested city neighborhood. Not one single major incident. And that's for the whole season through the World Series. So we could do a podcast on just what it was for the stories I could tell about security for the World Series and things like that. And I'm sure tie right into stories. From there, new regime came in, new mayor. I wasn't on the favorite list, so I got sent to bomb and arson as a punishment. Put me in my place.
I was going to say that sounds pretty good to me.
But when you get rain, just make the best of it. So I go to bomb and arson, and the detective stuff as far as the arson guys are certified. They know what they're doing. What do you guys need? The bomb squad were a little difficult. They're prima donnas.
Pete, let's hear about this.
Yeah.
No, it's
the ones in Chicago.
It's the same in New York. They had the A&E squad, arson explosives. Yeah, man. Look, the bomb squad guys, highly specialized. They kind of wear it on their sleeve a little bit. The arson guys, a little bit more. Look, arson cases are incredibly difficult cases to solve.
Yeah.
So, in fact, even within ATF, the arson investigators are probably our best investigators because you don't often have confidential informants. You're locking somebody up and flipping them. I mean, it's usually financial stuff that you're sorting through because it's arson for profit, especially. But no, man, they're difficult cases, and that's why not a lot of people want to go into that kind of work. It's because it's hard to earn your pay doing that kind of work.
Yeah. So, like I said, I knew that certain people didn't like me, so I took advantage of it, and they just didn't want to see me or hear from me. I took advantage. I went to every federal training course, on the bombs and the security and stuff like that. Lo and behold, new mayor comes in. What does he do? Gets NATO. Who is the CPD's expert on anti-terror and mitigating explosive devices? I end up on that, do a good job with that, and then I took it back to the detective division. I went back to Area 1, which is my first stop as a detective. Now I'm running the whole place. And and there are a lot of people there that I had known. There were a few people there I knew going back to childhood. And it's a different atmosphere in a squad. It's not the same as a district, stand up for inspections and things like that. They're trained professionals.
Yeah.
For the most part, I mean, there's always a few problem children, but for the most part, they're people, they're dedicated. They know what they're doing. Give them what they need make sure they're pointed in the right direction. Gently remind them what's the right direction. Make sure they go off in the right direction and stand back if they need you for anything. Let them do their thing. It's a great job. It's a great job.
So let them do their thing. So we had, so we're going to have, Pete's going to be on vacation on December 2nd. We're going to have a deputy chief from the patrol ranks who's going to guest host with me in place of Pete. But when talking to him, he was counseling our chief of detectives at the time. And our chief of detectives was a very, very smart man, brilliant, but not the best people person running the chief of detectives. This is not Bobby Boyce. It's someone else. I actually had a good relationship with him, but I don't want to mention his name. It's going to fire up the chat. But what was really important, and this speaks to what you're talking about, Chief, is Mike Marino had to constantly remind this chief of detectives, you have the best detectives in the world. And then I'm sure Chicago would argue the same, and that's perfectly fine, and that's the good rivalry, because I do believe the Chicago cops and detectives, the coppers and detectives are top-notch. Gary McCarthy always said the cops and the detectives there are stellar. There's other things going on, but they're not the rank and file guys. Right. The men and women were phenomenal there in his experience. And Gus Miniotis was a really good friend of mine. He was McCarthy's chief of staff, said the same thing. Yeah, such a gentleman. But he kept telling them, listen, they're going to play. They're going to do what they do. However, when the bell rings, you're not going to see better police work than when it's time to do it. And just let them be and stop breaking their balls, because they're in such a high pressure job that when they need to play and hang out and maybe they're goofing off and just sleeping, but when that bell rings and you need a case solved, they're there. And that's the reality of the world. You can say what you want, and it's not right that some guy, didn't show up for work on time. In my precinct where we were just grateful that the cops showed up. We just grateful they showed up. It was so bad, you know what I mean? So I know that when the bell rang, the detectives in the Chicago Police Department probably just did phenomenal work.
They did. When it was time to go, they went.
Yep.
Just stand back, find out what they need, give it to them or get it to them, stand back and let them do their thing.
Yeah, and what's really funny is the blocking and tackling that needs to be done, and it's so hard, and we've talked about this extensively, and Pete, I'm going to go to you for a second from the federal side of things, but all of these big capers that hit and it's sensational, they want to know, but how hard is it for you as the chief of detective to stand back, like you're saying, and wait, because they're doing it, they're not goofing around, but the patience, the amount of time that you need to they'll call me when they need to call me and fill us in so we can run it up the chain. How does that feel? And then Pete, from the federal side, we talked about the shootings in Parkland. And so any more thoughts on that? But go ahead, Chief.
It's one of those things where you hope you have a few good sergeants or a few good lieutenants that are in the office. Chief, we got this. Go sit down, or come on, Chief, let's go grab coffee. Let's go grab lunch while we're waiting to hear from them. And also because I came from that background, I know what it's like. There's bosses that look over your shoulder and what's new? Where are we going? When are we going to get there? And what a corrosive effect that has. You're not doing anything. It's not added value. So I learned my lesson about, hey, go off to the side. Everything's fine. I knew that early on. I was one of them. I understood the mentality. I looked out for them. They were my guys. I'd correct them when they were wrong. If we had a problem, we'd resolve it. But they were my guys and girls, and I let them do their thing. And that's when you get results. There's sometimes, you have the heater, and the media's calling the soup, and the soup is calling me, and, then you got to play the game. But the rest of the time, and if you do it consistently, they know what your style is. They know it's not your style to nitpick. they know that if you start calling and saying, hey, I need that, you're getting pressure from somebody else. And that pressure is from the very top, if not City Hall. So they want answers. So they understand it and they respond to that. I don't bother them if I really don't need them. Let them do their thing, encourage them, make sure they have what they need. I trust them. That's the big thing. You got to trust your detectives.
So Pete, and I know we talked about this a little bit last week with Sergeant Carl Miller, but like, is there ever a case going on in the country where you're trying to get this information on a federal level, like with the bombing of the U.S. Postal Service in Austin a couple of years ago, where the guy was from Pflugerville? Any of stuff like that? Is it ever like that in the federal space, or is this only like a minute to minute to minute to minute information at the local level? Because you're the only one here that's seen both.
Well, look, to be honest with you, the federal system is interesting because it varies so much city to city to city. Like, for example, when I worked in the homicide squad in the Bronx, I was doing federal cases. And then when I became an ATF agent, I was doing the same thing. We had SDNY. So they took anything we brought them, which was a blessing. We had good relationships with most federal agencies, although the FBI was a little tough to work with because the FBI was always, they thought they were the premier law enforcement organization. They would take information and run with it, never share information back with you. Phoenix, completely different animal. The agencies did not get along with one another, although we got along with the marshals spectacularly, as you heard from Dave Gonzalez. And we did okay with HSI, which was ICE back then, and HSI didn't exist. Chicago's a strange animal in that, like, the agents I know that work there, and some of them are ATF legends, Jimmy Needles, Chris Bayless, Jeff Sisto, Timmy Wilson. Those guys, they never left Chicago because they just loved working there so much. But they were up against the wall because the U.S. Attorney's Office there kind of sucked. They weren't as bad as Phoenix, but they would say no to a lot of cases. So you'd see agents going out there, doing things the right way, and then half the time being told, nah, we're not interested in pound sand. As far as sharing information, it varies city to city. And it's weird. A lot of it's interpersonal stuff. There's a lot of politics that go into play. Like, we had Dan Linsky on as one of our guests, if you recall, from up in Boston. The FBI in Boston isn't too well liked by other agencies because of the whole Whitey Bulger thing. So politics play into a lot of the information sharing. I do know that as far as Chicago goes, the ATF agents that I know that work there said the relationships with the Chicago PD were stellar. And like we mentioned before, they were cops. You hear the same thing about Detroit, some of these other cities where cops have to go out there and grind it out, and the agents want to be there grinding it out with them. So it's hard to paint the whole country with a broad brush, but information sharing is really good in some parts of the country, Tommy, and it sucks in others. And I heard Gene talking earlier about being, having family up in Canada. The one place I worked where I saw information sharing done at a spectacular level was Canada. On a provincial level and across the country, they share law enforcement intelligence far, far, far better than we do in the United States. And that's just my observations.
But that's because they're all going to the same hockey games together and they're all drinking Molson.
Yeah, they're all living
That's
in
why.
miles of the border. No, seriously. His egos aren't as prevalent up there. Agency pride gets in the way of things. And like I said, a place like Chicago, where the cops are out there grinding it out, they'll work well with others. But in some places, man, the agencies, it's all about who's the first one that's going to get up to the podium. And that's the problem. It should be, hey, who's the first one that's going to put handcuffs on the bad guy? And we all got there together. That's how it really should be. But it is. It's just the nature of the beast.
Right.
Yeah. So I want to ask you a question, Chief, and see how this would have played out with you. So what I was able to figure out with a couple of sensational cases in my precinct, the 79th precinct, Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, was all of the executives would try to set up camp in my office. And then literally one floor down, right underneath where I was sitting, was the precinct commander's office. And I was like, I went to the precinct commander, the patrol commander, who we worked very closely together with. And I said, can't we get all of the big shots to sit in your office and then let us do our thing behind closed walls, and we'll filter the information, and then I'll run up and down multiple times an hour giving you the information that you need. And instead of you sitting there listening to it and stuff that you might not want to hear. And all I ever did was ask to do that, and no one ever said no. And I'm like, why is not everyone doing this? Because I always heard other detective squad commanders talk about their offices being taken over by people who have never run an investigation, don't know what is good, what's not good, what needs to be vetted, what not need to be vetted, which is garbage information. And we had a big case where I learned that every single lead we generated turned out to be crap, because people were just telling us what we wanted to hear. So like that lead comes in, and then I say to the detective, well, how did this lead come in? Did they come to you? No, we grabbed them out of this spot. Oh, they're just telling you what you want to hear. So we got to work a little harder on that to really vet it out. Is the source credible? Is the information credible? Yes or no? Blah, 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 blah. So there was a process. So like when you guys set up camp, did you guys at the executive levels in Chicago with the chief of detectives and the superintendents, or at least their representative, were you in the thick of the detectives, or did you give them the space to filter the information? And when they finally vetted it, what is credible, that it got to you guys?
Yeah, under Superintendent McCarthy, he stayed in his office, and we all had cell phones. There's no reason to be out there. He was smart enough to know. He learned that lesson. Yeah. And there were times to be out there. There were times you had to go and do a press conference. I might be called to do the call and show up for the press conference. Maybe I would say a few words about the progress of the case or ask for help or what have you. He would talk about it from the 30,000 foot level. I would talk specifics, but he gave us the latitude. Good
to hear. So listen, we got a whole bunch of pictures from some of the stuff in your career. I'd love to go through them. And then if it's okay with you, Pete, if you got anything else, we'll go through the pictures. And then at the end, I want to just let's get your 18 months of being the chief of detectives. And what is that like? Because that is the heavy head, wears the crown, right? On all the investigations in the Chicago Police Department. So does that sound good for you guys? And, with 15, 20 minutes left in the
fine with me.
In the show.
Let's go to the videotape, to the pictures.
So let's do this. Let me get at the beginning. So we're going to just start with what you brought us up. So here we go. So who's this little guy?
Little guy is Alex Valadez. Alex Valadez is the son of a Chicago police officer who was killed before he was even born, about 6 years before this picture was taken. I'm on the left there, and this is Alex's kindergarten graduation, and his mom sort of made a semi-uniform for him, as you can see, and myself and some people in the detective division got a bike for him for his graduation, his kindergarten graduation.
So I'm going to skip because I think we have, is this him as an adult or a young adult?
Last summer. I've stayed in touch with Alex, helped him out with a lot of things. As a matter of fact, this summer he needed some money, so he helped me out with the lawn around my house. And so I still see him. I talk to him frequently. As a matter of fact, I was texting with him last night. We're supposed to take him out for dinner for his birthday. He wanted to go to Connie's Pizza, Chicago's finest pizza. Got to get that plug in there. And he had to cancel. He wasn't feeling too good. But I've maintained a relationship with him, and I'm blessed to have him in my life.
Hold on a second. Are we talking about deep dish pizza or real pizza?
A little bit of both. They have both.
Okay, because there was a question earlier and someone asked about the New York versus Chicago pizza. I just say that they're not. I love deep dish, but it's not pizza. It's like a pie. It's like a big, yeah. So anyway, so what do we got here? Who's this?
That's my last day on the police department. Grandkids came up to see me in my office before I went downstairs for the retirement ceremony.
That's great. Well, that's probably a wonderful memory for you, Chief. So
it is
really good. So let's go. We got that. We got a crime scene photo here.
Group of 13 people shot outside of Chicago Park on a summer evening. Made international news. It was the first time I ever was interviewed by the BBC. 13 people shot. Great work by the detectives. Got Sean McGavick, one of my sergeants, Ozzie Valdez, lieutenant, Bobby Myers, who was one of the sergeants, Kevin Ryan, who was in gang enforcement at the time, and Joe was the gang crimes guy for the local area. And this case was solved within 48 hours. The offenders were in custody. It was just a horrendous scene. It was straight out of something you'd see on the streets of Iraq.
Yeah.
Nice.
What's this one?
This is a picture of Vietnam Veterans Memorial. Standing to my right is Jim Balser, the alderman of the 11th Ward. And to his immediate right is Ed Wodnicki, another legend of the Chicago Police Department. You know, he was right up. He was a generation ahead of Mike Chasin and Tommy Puffpath, World War II Marine veteran, take no prisoners type of guy, legend. And he had been been chief of Dixie and the deputy superintendent for investigative services back in the day.
Got it.
Myself and our annual St. Jude parade, first Sunday every May. We have a march, all the officers, sponsored by the St. Jude Society, to memorialize the officers who've given their life. Gentleman in the middle there is Kenny. He's who's a Purple Heart veteran of Iraq, and that was his partner. And it's just a great event. You see, I don't know if you've ever seen them on TV. It's something to see. Every unit sends somebody down. Everybody's in uniform except the detectives, and just march in remembrance of our fallen brothers and sisters.
Okay, so we have a couple here on the same individual, so please feel free to share what's going on.
Jim Mullen, gentleman in the wheelchair. Jim lived across the alley from me when I was a detective. He worked on tactical patrol in the 24th District. He was shot while responding to a call, a man with a gun, shots fired call. He was shot in the throat. He survived some of the best medical care in the world. He is totally ventilator dependent from the neck down. He's still active as best he can be. He started his mother had a Irish recipe for applesauce, and he turned it into a business, and he set up a company working out of his wheelchair, set up a company that manufactures and sells applesauce and a few other related products. And some other officers, we had a bunch of officers from my old district, the 9th District. And what we did is Jim had donated a bunch of his products, applesauce, to the Our Lady of the Angels food pantry, and we dropped it off there. A year ago last Christmas, had some of Jim's old partners from his old district, the 24th District, stop by his house a couple days before Christmas just to say hi, let him know they're thinking about him, and he's not forgotten.
God bless him.
Yeah, it's good. And then here's the last one.
This here it's also Jimmy, very close to Jimmy. I just had Jimmy over for lunch with some people in the country club by my house a couple of weeks ago. This is outside the old 9th District station. And I did a series of events where people like Jim would come out and talk to the young cops and let them know it's not all grins and giggles. It's dangerous. And to show them, but if you do get hurt, you can make it. You can survive. And I wanted the young officers to meet somebody like him and see his determination, his resolve, his spirit.
It sounds very much like Stephen McDonald did for us, Pete, would you say?
Exactly.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, wonderful. And Stephen McDonald has a son. I think he's a captain now. He might even be a deputy inspector right now. I don't know if he got promoted, but he made captain recently. And so, shot in the line of duty, and then just continued on and was an inspiration for all of us. So really appreciate those guys. Right. They're truly, truly heroes. Okay, what's this, Chief?
This is my son, who is a lieutenant of the Wauwatosa, Wisconsin Police Department. He's graduating from the FBI National Academy last September. The lady to my right, Tracy Walker, now Deputy Chief in charge of Internal Affairs for the Chicago PD. She was a PO on my watch when I was a watch commander in the 21st District. So it's just a small, again, the small world. You know, my son goes off to the FBI Academy. So get a call. Hey, do you know a lady by the name of Tracy Walker? Yeah, I know Tracy Walker. She worked for me. Well, she's here and she's our class president.
Yeah, awesome. It's really good. And doing the chief thing.
It's me getting ready to talk to the news media who want a statement outside a funeral home where a wake was being held for an officer who'd been murdered in the line of duty.
And finally, your last press conference picture we have, probably not the last one you've done.
Impromptu press conference on the scene of a murder on the steps of a church on Father's Day in a Hispanic neighborhood that was in the 9th District.
Can I ask you a question? The gentleman behind you to the right in that photograph, is that the alderman who's quite vocal about public safety?
Ray Lopez, that's him.
Oh, Lopez. Yeah, there he is. I see him. Yeah.
Great guy.
Yeah, he seems that way. I see him on the news a lot, and he speaks. He seems to have the right priorities. I'll say that.
He certainly does.
And he's a Democrat.
Yeah, and he's a Democrat. There are a few that have common sense and good judgment.
Well, my point is that I'm tired of being labeled. Oh, you're a cop. You must be Republican.
Right.
No. I'm common sense.
There you go.
Yeah, he's a courageous guy. He speaks up. He speaks truth to power. He's a courageous dude. I have a lot of respect for him.
He certainly does.
Yeah. No, good stuff. All right. So we got 8:51. We're going to start wrapping up. Great stuff, Chief. Really great career. I know we could go on for hours and hours. Even when I told you, I'll share everyone with the audience. When I told the Chief we're going to be going for 2 hours, he's like, "What? 2 hours?" Vernon Gebereth. We had Vernon Gebereth on. He was like, "Wait a second. I thought we were going to be done in 45 minutes." I was like, we can't even get close to it. Like, have you ever been in a tavern and only spent 45 minutes in a tavern?
No.
So
only when you're on the wagon, Bobby. When you're on the wagon,
Exactly. Yeah. So listen, we got 451 live active listeners right now or watchers. Doing great, really good, Chief. Thanks for that. For coming on. So let's just wrap it up. Any final thoughts? What are you going on? You're a big officer wellness supporter. So why don't you talk a little bit about that? Pete and you will definitely chime in on this a lot. So give us your wellness efforts that's going on in Chicago.
Yeah. After my retirement, I met a lady by the name of Cammie Jeswin, who's a psychologist. She runs a program. It's a first responders wellness retreat, and it's not a department thing. It's something she does under the sponsorship of a social service agency in Chicago. It's not affiliated with any department. It's for first responders, police, fire, EMS, dispatchers, and she even includes correctional officers who suffer from PTSD or are going that way. And it's a series of small workshops and seminars. Talk about the different types of injuries, PTSD, the symptoms, what you can do to alleviate it. She has a couple of people that come in, professionals that provide EMDR therapy to people right on the scene. And of the workshop, people are together for 3 days. It's in a hotel. All the expenses are paid by the sponsor, and it's also funded by grant funding from the Department of Justice. So they stay and they bond with each other. They, even after the class is over, the formal classroom stuff, and they talk to each other and they share experiences. This worked for me. It didn't work for you, worked for me. And they learn how to get out of the hole that they're in. The old story about, cop falls into a hole in a sidewalk and he's calling for help. And people just walk by. Nothing I can do. Finally, one guy stops, jumps in the hole with him. So, what the hell are you doing down here? Now there's two of us stuck here. He says, no, that's not the thing. The thing is, I've been down here before. I know how to get you out of here. So we're both going to get out of here now. And that's what it's all about. It's helping our brothers and sisters.
Yeah. Pete?
Yeah.
I know this is your space, man.
Yeah, look, I suffered from PTSD after 9/11 and survivor's guilt and some other things, and I stayed quiet about it for over a decade. And then finally, when I wound up with lung cancer after 9/11, I finally decided, hey, man, I came into this profession whole. I want to leave whole. And that's when I finally got some help. So there was light at the end of the tunnel. I just never looked for it for a decade because I came up at a time where in our profession, you suck it up. You know, you don't ask for help. I'm the police. I'm who you come to from. I don't ask for help. So the fact that someone with your background that rose to the level that you rose to is doing what you're doing, man, I'm getting choked up just because it really means a lot. So thank you for doing that, because what we did to people in our profession back in the day was wrong. And then finally, I'll give credit where it's due. The military were the first ones to recognize PTSD and start doing shit about it. And we're behind the curve. But when chiefs like yourself with outstanding reputations are involved, it brings credibility to it. So thank you for doing what you're doing. It means so much.
It's an honor. You know, I stood on the shoulder of those giants and they said, just make sure that you learn from us. We don't mind you standing on our shoulder, but learn from us. Don't make the mistakes that we made. Look out for your people.
Yeah.
That was ingrained in me from day one.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's see. So just to wrap up some of the comments. So Ron Layson, getting back to the big sensational cases. Ron was a former district precinct commander for us, district for you guys. Ran 2 different precincts, never took over a detective squad. I would visit and let them keep me apprised, but either my office or the muster room is where we set up big capers. That's the way to do it. Let the men and women in the detective squad filter it and then push the information when they finally verify what's good and what's not good, because otherwise you're going to run with crazy stuff. So thanks, Ron, for that. Anthony DiMaggio, Yonkers PD. We have a Yonkers executive that we're recruiting. So interesting, Anthony. So we'll let you know what's going on with that. Thank you for that. Great show, gentlemen. We need Child Roy for a part 2. I'm not sure if you are Child Roy.
He corrected it.
Oh, Chief Roy for a part 2.
I would
like Child Roy.
A younger version. Younger version. Okay.
Yeah. That's hilarious. Yeah. So anyway, really great stuff. We could keep going for sure. But thanks for coming on, Chief. I'm going to do some wrap up, some house cleaning we do for the podcast and the Finest Unfiltered family. We have multiple shows on a single platform that Pete and I are infiltrating and just getting our story. Listen, we're doing this for fun. It's a passion project for us because we want to tell the stories of the coppers and detectives and the federal agents in this country whose story need to be heard. And, you know, are we getting millions and millions of listeners? No, we're getting our small little world of our supporters, our retired and our active members who hear and again can walk on the shoulders of the giants that we've all worked for. And I hope that these young cops today get to see not only what happened in the past, but that their bosses and their supervisors today treat them with the courtesy and the respect and mentor them and lead them on the path of righteousness on good police work. And taking care of the community and taking care of each other and then taking care of themselves.
Amen.
So with that, Chiefs, after we do the outro, stay on because all of our guests keep signing off. And I'm like, no, we do a wrap up and make sure everything's okay. So just hang out for 5
until the screen goes dark.
Just hang out for a second. Oh my God. So, okay, everybody, we're going to start wrapping up. We're going to let Pete plug his book. Pete, go.
Yeah, Deadly Path. It's nonfiction, which should scare you a little bit. It's the story about Operation Fast and Furious, something that should have never happened that led to the death of a Border Patrol agent and thousands of Mexican citizens and Mexican cops. It's what I saw and experienced. No speculation. Available on Amazon. Signed copies can be found at my website, which is up there at top, peterjforcelli.com. And if you read it, I hope you enjoyed it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
I'll tell you my thoughts. Everyone wants to legislate more guns, and they don't even prosecute the gun charges and the gun crimes that are on the books right now. Pete, next week, I want to talk about Mark Ruffalo, the actor who came out on a big Second Amendment comment, even though he's doing this show called Task or some shit. And he's like, what do you guys need guns for? And he goes on this tangent. And it's crazy. So I definitely want to do a Second Amendment gun thing, because this is the example where they're not even prosecuting the laws that are on the books now. Why do you people want more laws?
Yeah.
Like, maybe if you prosecuted some of the people that are out there doing really dastardly things. Oh, and by the way, how many NRA members, and I'm not an NRA member and I'm not lobbying for the NRA. I don't really care one way or the other. I am a gun owner. But like, how many NRA members have been accused, charged, and convicted of a crime with a gun?
Yeah. Well, Tommy, conversely, how many people have we stood over the bodies of who were good people, that were a store owner or a homeowner or whatever, that couldn't defend themselves from an armed thug with a gun? When criminals have guns and aren't afraid of the law, and the police, the thing is, when you need help in seconds, the police are minutes away. Look, I'm not an advocate for having to shoot anybody, but hey, man, sometimes when you need to defend yourself or your family, having access to a firearm is life or death. So I'm all for crushing people who misuse firearms. Don't blame the inanimate object for the misdeeds of human beings.
Yeah, but I was a little pissed off when they prosecuted Plexico Burress, because I needed him in my wide receiver. My Giants, I needed Plexico, man. Come on. All right. Anyway, seriously. Okay. So on the executive perspective, tomorrow night at 5:05 p.m. Wednesday night, Rob No Cash and what's his name? Rob Lukash, and then Ron Layson, the executive perspective, are going to talk to retired NYPD Lieutenant Stephen Weiss, who is now doing work in Dallas, Texas, and he's also a research director for the Officer Down Memorial page. So thanks for Stephen Weiss for doing what he does. Great conversation tomorrow night. And then today at 1:05 p.m., Sal Greco did the NYPD aviation lawsuit. We had the commanding officer of aviation was involved in a scandal. This is his side of his story. So listen on replay to Sal Greco's story from today at 1:05, and then every Tuesday and Thursday, 1:05 Eastern Standard Time for the Sal Greco show. And every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, the Finest Unfiltered, everyone knows that, at 8:05, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, with John, Eric, and Marlon. All right, for us at the Finest Unfiltered, YouTube at the Finest Unfiltered, X at 10-4 Tavern. Pete and I, you'll find us mostly on LinkedIn. That's where you'll find us most active and prevalent. And even the chief is active on LinkedIn, doing a lot of his advocacy, especially the officer wellness stuff that he just talked about. We also have a 10-4 Tavern podcast page, and then Instagram and Facebook at 10-4 Tavern. So with that, Chief, hang on. I'm going to do my outro, and we are out. Everybody, please stay safe, be good, and keep fighting the fight.
God bless.